Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Black Business Roundtable. I am your host, Doug Blacksher, broadcasting to you live from the city of Diversity, Oakland, California. Black History Month is upon us, and this month our podcast lineup of guests will light it up, audience. This is a historic time as President Biden plans to nominate a Black woman to the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the land that will give our women of color another first in history. Kamala Harris in 2021 became the highest ranking woman as Vice President of the United States, just over 1 year ago in 2021. Women are moving forward. Thank you. And last week I made a mistake, and I want to briefly do a sidebar. My sister passed away, and it's been extremely challenging for me. And I think last week I said Kamala Harris was the vice mayor. I meant to say the vice president of the United States of America, Kamala Harris. So, support Michael Thrash at his next court appearance, April 4th, 2022. Please support this case via your social media and hashtag Driving While Black, Michael Thrash, Taylor County, TX. That is Driving While Black, Michael Thrash, Taylor County, TX for Texas. And tag the City of Abilene in Taylor County, Texas, Mayor's Office, and national and local news outlets. Attach our podcast link from 10/14/21 list in today's podcast description online, or see link below on the screen, which is, if you look at it, it's below. Now, audience, we need your help. Driving While Black, if you are Black, affects every Black person in America. So let's support Michael Thrash and Driving While Black while the law enforcement down there stole, and I use the word, they stole his money. Thank you. A special thanks to our sponsors. Visit Chef Carter Lewis of Soul Slice Restaurant and Catering in Oakland, California. The website lists winter break, but please note they are open every Friday and February from 6 to 10 p.m. for business, and biscuits and beer. And gospel brunch 12 to 3 p.m. on February 13th, which is a Sunday, so it'll be a soul brunch. So RSVP today. Do it right away. Thank you. Also, spots are filling up quick for their spring season catering services, Easter, Mother's Day, and graduation events, located at 5849 San Pablo Avenue, Oakland, California, 94608. Soulslice.com is their website. That's soulslice.com is their website, and phone number is 510-879-7689. Tell them Black Business Roundtable sent you, and I guarantee you Chef Carter will cook your meal with a bigger smile than he would have. Also, Magnolia Engineering and Construction for their continued support. And we congratulate Tammy Willis on being the minority woman-owned engineering and construction firm. Visit Tammy Willis and Magnolia Engineering and Construction at magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. And I also want to share some great news on Tammy Willis. Tammy Willis will be ushered in and accepting the president of the Women's Council of Associated Real Property Brokers. Their motto is Pearls for the Culture. Tammy, you are just tearing it up out there. Congratulations from the Black Business Roundtable. Today's show highlights. Tonight, we will discuss updates on the Oakland City Council District 4 upcoming political race. In addition, we will speak with two gentlemen that were both previously incarcerated and now they're past and how they have turned their lives into serving others. Audience, you are not going to want to miss these two brothers. I am truly happy to see brothers turning their lives around and not only enriching their lives, but enriching the communities that they live in. You are not going to want to miss this today. Our special guest, weekly check-in with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology, Department Chair, Assistant Professor of Psychology at University of the West. I'll hold that welcome because Dr. Ashley's running a few minutes late today, but she will be here for our weekly mental therapy. And audience, let me be clear. I need it. I lost my father about 8 years ago, and now my sister is gone. And I'm sure they're out of pain and in a better place. But for those of you who have not seen or visited or call your mom, call your dad, call your sisters, call your brothers, call your cousins, and even call your friends just to say hi and that you love them. Because when they're not here, it's too late to give them a call. And I will be asking Dr. Ashley to give us a little bit of mental therapy on how to get through those challenging times. Our next guest and weekly legal eagle, Janani Ramachandran Esquire. She continues to be our social justice warrior, fighting for Oakland one day at a time. Let's congratulate Janani Ramachandran and her new campaign run for Oakland City Council District 4, and she was born and raised in the East Bay. Catch up with Janani anytime at Central Legal de la Raza website, centrallegal.org, or via her new website, Janani4, and the 4 is FOR, Oakland.com, and new Instagram at Janani, the number 4, Oakland. That's at Janani, the number 4, Oakland. Let's light it up with our special guest shortly with John Jones III, formerly incarcerated, now an advocate, transforming his community by channeling his experience and expertise on issues related to criminal justice reform. Now, let me expand on this a little bit. I had an opportunity to meet John several years ago, and this man has come out of nowhere to make an impact, not only here in Oakland, but the county and in the state of California. Young brothers and sisters who have been incarcerated or coming out of incarceration, there is a place for you in our community. This show is going to show you how to get involved and be a beacon of light to those who've been incarcerated and coming out, and show how you can be an asset to our community. Our next guest is Saabir Lockett, a former gang member in Los Angeles County, sentenced to life in prison at 19 years of age. He changed his life in prison through obtaining a college education and fought for and won his freedom after 21 years. That is short of a miracle. For the national political highlights in several elections, Marcus Flowers is a brother. And for those of you who don't know what brother is, he's a black man. Proud Army veteran, husband, father, and patriot. He is a Georgia Democrat running for Congress to unseat and just out fundraise. That means he raised more money than Marjorie Taylor Greene, who he's running against. And please take the time to look what Marjorie Taylor Greene stands for. And let me be clear, audience, it doesn't look like she stands for anybody who looks like me or a lot of you out there. Learn more on Instagram at Marcus4 Georgia or Marcus4, and that's FOR Georgia.com. He is also coming on our show in February 2022, and that's this month. We look forward to welcoming him on the show, and so that he can address some of those serious issues that are destroying Georgia and splitting them up and dividing people in Georgia. Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, a Democrat, helped flip Georgia blue along with Senator John Ossoff, is running again for the U.S. Senate. He is a pastor, advocate, Savannah born and raised, and Morehouse College alumni. Learn more on Instagram at Raphael Warnock or Warnock4, and that's FOR Georgia.com. Stacey Abrams, a Democrat, is running to unseat Republican Brian Kemp for governor of Georgia. And to quote Stacey Abrams, opportunity in our state shouldn't be determined by zip code, background, or access to power. Learn more on Instagram at Stacey Abrams or StaceyAbrams.com. And just a sidebar on Stacey Abrams, let me be clear, audience. I had an opportunity to see her documentary about suppressed, and that's about having votes suppressed in Georgia, where they're taking away poll stations and making it difficult for Black and brown people in Atlanta, Georgia, where when you go to the white neighborhoods, you can be in and out in 5 minutes, and that's with parking your car. So let's keep that in mind when we look to put a governor in. Stacey Abrams, a Democrat, is running to unseat Republican Brian Kemp for governor in Georgia, and to quote Stacey Abrams, opportunity in our state shouldn't be determined by zip code, background, or access to power. Learn more on Instagram at Stacey Abrams or, once again, StaceyAbrams.com. Val, there's my sister. What's going on, gorgeous?
Hi, Doug.
How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I love the accessories. You're looking good, girl.
Thank you.
Val Demings, a Democrat, is running for 2021 Florida seat. If you would like to stay updated on Team Demings, text the word JOIN to 77076. The former Orlando police chief is seeking to unseat Republican Little Marco Rubio in Florida. Once again, Little Marco, pack your little bags and put your little Kid March tennis shoes on and do what Trump told you to do. Scurry on up out of there. Val Demings for the 2022 Senate, her tagline, never tire. Election date, November 8th, 2022. Visit Val Demings at valdemings.com or Instagram at Val Demings. Now, wait a minute, we have to backtrack because she's here. And we want to welcome our weekly Doctor of Psychology. And I say weekly because the message that you share on this podcast with our audience has helped, and will continue to help. I want to break 30 seconds by saying two important people in our community, in our country, have taken their lives away. And that is Mrs. King's son. Her son committed suicide. And the young lady who was Miss America, Miss Black America, she committed suicide. Audience, mental therapy is needed in the Black community. Do not take it lightly. There are a lot of Black people who are suffering and need people like Dr. Ashley. Just like you'd have a broken leg or bad cavity, you go see a doctor or you go see a dentist. I humbly ask that you go see a doctor of psychology, and preferably one who understands our culture and our background and can give information that can help improve the quality of life for you. Thank you. Dr. Ashley, please take it away for the news of the day. Thank you, and it's great seeing you, sister.
It's great to see you too, Doug. And thank you, as always, for being an advocate for mental health. And we'll kind of go in that a little later in the show. But for our news of the day, again, courtesy of the Equal Justice Initiative, on this date in 1948, a Black woman and her children were sentenced to die for defending themselves. Ms. Rosalie Ingram, a Black woman, and her two children, Wallace, age 17, and Sammy Lee, age 14, were convicted by an all-white jury in a one-day trial in Ellaville, Georgia. The three family members were sentenced to death by electric chair for killing an armed white man in self-defense after he violently assaulted and threatened them. And on November 4th, 1947, a white landowner named John Stratford, armed with a shotgun and pocket knife, attacked Miss Ingram, a widow who worked as a sharecropper on his farm near Ellaville, Georgia. And testimony later revealed that Mr. Stratford hit Mrs. Ingram in the head with the butt of his rifle while threatening to sexually assault her and shoot her. And her courageous sons rushed to their mother's aid when they heard their screaming and defended her with a farm tool, killing Mr. Stratford. Subsequently, they were arrested. And unfortunately, the state decided that they were all should be sentenced to death by electrocution, and their execution was scheduled for February 27th, though Wallace and Sammy were both minors. They were eligible under the law at the time, and the U.S. Supreme Court did not ban the execution of children until 2005. And after post-trial motion and pressure from civil rights activists, the trial judge changed the Ingram's sentences to life imprisonment. And then in July 1948, the Georgia Supreme Court affirmed their convictions and life sentences. And here we are. The Ingrams, though, on a brighter note, were not released, not executed, but were not released on parole until 1959. Again, it's Black History Month, and we'll be talking about resilience. We're going to hear firsthand accounts of resilience and how we can turn our lives around. But one of the things about trauma that can understandably keep people stuck is this idea of having to work through this idea of sustaining trauma that you didn't ask for, that is not your fault, and having to cope with horrific life experiences at the hand of another.
Dr. Ashley, I just want to say, for those people who are non-Black, when you say get over it, how do you get over something like this? We can forgive, but we can't forget. These are actual stories. These are actual life events that has changed the lives of the Black family here in America. Dr. Ashley, thank you for so eloquently stating a mother who was beaten by a white man, and her kids came to protect her, and they got the electric chair. Unbelievable. Thank you for that story. Next up, our weekly check-in with our very own Dr. Ashley Coleman, Doctor of Psychology. Take it away, Dr. Ashley. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doug. And I first want to just shout out that I have on Black Psychologists Matter sweatshirt for Black History Month. Thank you, and again, greetings to our listeners. Doug, as you mentioned, deaths by suicide have been in the news, and to add to the previous individuals that you acknowledged, I also want to acknowledge the mayor of Hyattsville, Maryland, for our Maryland listeners, Mr. Kevin Ward, who died and currently is being investigated as a suicide. So here we are in Black History Month, where we are celebrating our ancestors, what they have accomplished in the face of racism, terrorism, domestically and throughout the diaspora. And there is an opportunity for various businesses to capitalize on this month by demonstrating through various actions that they are supporters. And while there's all this attention to Black people, I really want to highlight the importance of owning our own resilience individually. So we may hear stories about our ancestors that have accomplished wonderful things. We should hold them on a pedestal, but also consider our own stories of resilience. And I find that to be really important, because later on in the show, we're going to hear about how a brother was able to turn his life around while being incarcerated. And this idea of thinking about the experiences of loneliness and what that self-talk had to be like in order to sustain themselves in moments when maybe they didn't have all the external support, or maybe they were replaying various events. It's the battle in the mind. And while it's wonderful to have a community, there are times in life when we have to encourage ourselves. And that doesn't mean that you need to isolate. Reach out to people, but also catch, what are you saying to yourself? What is the tone of voice you use with yourself when you've made a mistake, when you're overwhelmed, right? It's nothing wrong with taking inventory. What could I do better? What could I do differently? But we have to be our own cheerleaders, even if we got it in childhood or if we didn't. Therapy is a great place to go to have a non-judgmental, supportive voice for someone to encourage, be empathic, and not judge whatever it is you're carrying with you. But in addition to that, I think it's really important to think of how we treat ourselves, developing self-love, and also self-compassion. So what can you congratulate yourself about? Maybe it's a former victory. It may seem silly. Why am I still celebrating that? I should be further along. There can be a lot of things, but what can you celebrate about yourself while you still have breath in your body? And then honor that resilience that you've come this far. And while you still have breath in your body, there is still an opportunity to turn it around. So that is what I'm so, as a clinician, I have the privilege to listen to Black, brown, white, and other stories of resilience. And they often allow me to get in on their brainstorming of turning and developing that next chapter. I like to say there's an after this. It may seem dark. There is an after this. So just wanted to instill hope, and just know we all have the chapters that are hurtful, sad, that we don't want read aloud. How can we honor that, work through it, and still have hope that our story can end better than it started?
Dr. Ashley, let me be perfectly clear. The two brothers that are coming onto the show today, I would like for you to take a bigger chunk of talking to them in regards to what is the, hello, Eloise Middleton, my sister. What is the mental challenges to know that you've been handed a life sentence, and one of them had 2 life sentences, and to overcome that, to get your GED, and a college degree, and win your case and get out and further that. I mean, I want you to dive right. I might have to sit back and get some popcorn, because one thing that I have stressed continuously on this Black Business Roundtable is the mental part. Audience, if you can free your mind, you can accomplish anything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Ashley, I want to say that Chef Carter will not be here today. He had some family business in his family. He had to fly back home and had a death in the family. But I promised Dr. Chef Carter Lewis that we would promote him as if he were here and we were back at his restaurant and he was walking us through the kitchen. So please, Dr. Ashley, take it away.
Absolutely. So listeners, we want to acknowledge one of our sponsors, Chef Carter Lewis of Soul Slice Restaurant and Catering in Oakland, California. His business is located at 5849 San Pablo Avenue, Oakland, California, 94608. Website, www.soulslice.com. Phone number, 510-879-7689. And I'm just thinking about the previous episodes where Chef Carter has been with us. The black eyed peas with collard greens, stewed tomatoes on rice, cornmeal fried oysters with garlic, more stewed tomatoes, cornmeal fried chicken with grilled broccoli on rice, oxtail stew on grits, baked cheese grits. And we also, let's mention the pizza, which I am also excited to try in the future. Again, the pizza is handmade, light, thin, and wheat with a wheat flour crust. They also have Cajun shrimp, beef hot links, green onions, pickled peppers, and tomato sauce on a biscuit crust. Their sweets include, see, this is where I get in trouble. Their sweets include apple crisp, peach cobbler pizza, sweet potato pie pizza, and cocoa rice pudding. They also offer beer, wine, and spirits by Black-owned entrepreneurs. Again, my stomach continues to growl. Chef Carter, we are thinking about you and look forward to your return.
Dr. Ashley, I was rushing so much to let you ramble off what he's serving up in that magnificently brand new kitchen with the clean floors and the bathroom that is a compliment of the rest of the restaurant. I forgot to give our sponsorship a break, but let me tell you something, folks. You will be treating yourself if you go to Soul Slice and get any one of those dishes that my colleague, friend, and my sister has just rambled off. I put my hand over my mouth because I was trying to, I don't want the people to see me doing like this. Oh, Lord have mercy, girl. But can you give our sponsor and Dr. Donnie Glover the reason why there is a blackusa.news, their acknowledgement? Thank you, Dr. Ashley.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of blackusa.news. Listeners, be sure to tune in to Chap and Friends on Mondays, Party Marty Let's Talk on Tuesdays. And we want to also acknowledge our main sponsor, Magnolia Engineering and Construction, whose vision is to further the presence of Black women in the construction and engineering industry through key partnerships and building contracts in the municipal, government, and transportation sectors. And to join our advertising family, please send us an email enclosed with the details about your company to bbrt2021@hotmail.com. Back to you, Doug.
And audience, I'm going to continuously compliment the owner of Magnolia Engineering and Construction. She will be ushered in and take her seat as president of the Women's Council of Associated Real Property Brokers for the 2022-2023. It's going to be on February 17th, 2022 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Go online and get your ticket, because you don't see her a lot on this show because she's out there making the world better. Lord have mercy. When I saw she's the president of the Women's Council of Associated Real Property. She owns a Magnolia Engineering and Construction. She's on the BART board for auditing. I mean, you know, I can't even say anything else for her, but other than, sister, you are setting the bar high. And we need examples like you, Dr. Ashley, scriptwriter behind the show, and other powerful sisters like Dr. D. Banks, like Dr. Glenda Newell, and other great women who have been on this show and have exemplified that when you take the hurdles and the barriers out of the way of Black people, we will rise. Thank you. Whew, I had to take a deep breath of saying that, you know, that you sisters, and I continuously say this, you sisters have run away with what's going on, making America great again. And I do say make America great again. Janani Ramachandran Esquire, fearlessly fighting for Oakland, our social justice warrior, friend of the show, and our very own legal expert and District 4 candidate. Dr. Ashley, can you please read this magnificent, impactful woman's bio? Thank you.
Absolutely. Running for Oakland City Council District 4, Janani Ramachandran Esquire attended Stanford University, where she studied political theory, systems of democratic governance, and economic development. Witnessing the injustices her clients faced at the hands of our inequitable legal system, she was driven to make a difference as a lawyer and attended Berkeley Law. There, Janani supported tenants, small business owners, and survivors of domestic violence across Oakland. Oh, Doug, you know my favorite post. Hi, Janani.
Hi.
You know what? Janani and Dr. Ashley, I just want to tell you both something. I am so fired up about this show today because before we get into you, John, I'm going to say this 30 seconds. The media, white media, continues to portray Black people with selling drugs, fighting, cussing, rapping. But these two brothers exemplify the greatness that's being suppressed with the bad visuals of you guys can't overcome. So getting that out the way, Janani, can you tell us about your participation this week in the protesting of school closures and some of the attendees at the event you posted about your on your Instagram page at Janani, the number 4, Oakland. And I'd like to say, I was on the phone Zoom conference call with the Oakland School Board District until 2:30 in the morning while the Mike Hutchinson and Van Cedric Williams, and I sit on the Community Policing Advisory Board with Van Cedric Williams, but they fought tooth and nail to save these schools in the Black community, which the other Unified School District directors, and I'll be mentioning you if this thing goes through every day. It'll be like reading This is the City of Diversity, because you know it ought to be ashamed of yourself. Why aren't you up in Montclair in the White District? Why aren't you up in Piedmont Hills? Why aren't you up in the Oakland Hills shutting down them schools? But you want to come down to the areas that have the least resources and will most impact the Black and brown community. Janani, please take it away.
You know, I am so grateful for advocates like you, Doug, who sit on these meetings till 2:33 in the morning. We had school board directors who logged off at 11 p.m. because they're tired. And yet you have children, you have kids on a school night waiting hours and hours to actually make public comment. And make no mistake, there was no coincidence in the fact how these schools were chosen. There is no coincidence that these are Black majority schools, that some of these schools are historically old schools, historically schools that are not just a place of consumption of math and science and English, but these are community homes, centers. When we talk about youth mental health, when we talk about the need for centering our young people, our future, we need schools that make a difference. And this week, having gone to some of the events, I've not only had the opportunity to hear from students and teachers, but so many different kinds of staff members, school social workers, administrators, nurses, people who are making a difference in these kids' lives. And to shut down schools in the middle of a global pandemic at a time where we need to be investing rather than divesting, and I will use the word defunding our children, it's incredible that they're getting away with this and have just are willing to continue to perpetuate these false narratives, these blatant misarguments in their data. And you want to talk about saving money, you spent $75,000 on the consultant that proposed this in the first place. And why, like Doug said, why are you choosing to close schools in the regions that you are? Why not schools in the hills? In fact, years ago, there were schools in the hills that were proposed to be closed for some of the same reasons of, that's my cat, disenrollment and low attendance and things like that. But those schools are safe. Those are not the ones that are proposed to be shut down this year. There is no coincidence in what they are doing and what our school board has continued to do to disinvest in our Black and brown children.
Well, I want to say this, audience, I am a proud graduate of Oakland Unified School District, Howard Elementary, King Estates Junior High School, and a proud graduate and alumni of Casamont High School in Oakland, California. I wanted to also point out, for you school board members, if you're not listening, I hope people who are listening to this send email. How are you planning to get these kids to school whose parents don't have cars, can't afford bus fare, et cetera, et cetera? It's just devastating what you're doing to these children. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Shame, shame, shame. Janani, I understand you are familiar with our guests today, Saabir Lockett and John Jones. How do you know our upcoming guests that will be on the beyond in the next few minutes? Thank you.
They're both community leaders that I admire greatly. There are a lot of people that get involved in work like violence prevention and community building and, talk a big game. And then there's some people in the city that actually make a difference. And these are two men that are impactful in ways that have ripple effects and make a difference. There are people who channel diversity and bring it into action. And in the worlds of violence prevention, economic development, the things that we need and the changes that we need to start seeing. And Saabir was an early supporter of my state assembly campaign and a good friend. And we need more people like Saabir and John in Oakland doing the work.
Dr. Ashley?
Yes, first I want to, thank Janani and you, Doug, for your efforts, again, in the community, being on these calls, advocating. Even though I'm in Los Angeles, I'm a proud daughter of a retired OUSD teacher. In addition to that, I am an OUSD graduate, and my clinical career started because a Black male psychologist by the name of Dr. Morgan Kazembe gave me an opportunity to do clinical work at Horace Mann Elementary, which is one of the schools proposed to be closing, unfortunately, for a program that was geared toward protecting Black and brown girls from the risk of sex trafficking. this is a tragedy to think of these schools closing. They are safe spaces. We need to invest resources. And so I just wanted to acknowledge both of your efforts, and hopefully our listeners can rally around, because these schools in the community do make a difference.
And if I can add one thing, so as I'm not a social worker, but I started my career doing case management and being trained and mentored by social workers, by school-based social workers and mental health counselors. And there's not a single person that denies the fact that we need more of that. We need more investment into our children's mental health. And when you remove that system of support and community, when you remove the access to food, to basic needs as well, because these are community centers, not just places for consumption, you lose a whole lot. And I will say that, as Doug was talking about calling out these school board members, on Tuesday, we were outside of the homes of certain school board members who reneged on their promises. We've talked about this in the past on the show, but there are so many electeds that say one thing during their political campaigns and then go around and do the opposite based on who's giving them money at any given time. And these decisions are frankly controlled by money, economic interests, billionaires, and developers who are trying to stimulate gentrification in the city. And you think about some of the many root causes of this, it's that. And we talk about almost every week on the show the exodus and flight of Black families in Oakland, and this is a major part of it. This is one of so many different causes and has to be stopped.
I'm going to start popping off at the mouth with Oakland Unified School Director Gary G. He had his agenda before he even got on the city, on the Oakland Unified School Board. He does not even listen to common sense information. I'm gonna just put it out there. How much money did they give you, Gary G? Because I'm looking at you every school board meeting, and you're not even open to address the need of our Black and brown children in the city of Oakland. Shame on you. And you might as well get used to me saying your name and others, because it's shameful. And since we have a few minutes left, I'd like to ask you, Dr. Ashley, your parent or one of your parents was a teacher in the Oakland. Have they said anything about the effect that's going to happen with these kids who have to leave their friends, have to travel across different districts to go to school and get education now? And some of them, because of the violence in Oakland, have to go into other areas in Oakland that there could be physical harm done to them. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. I again have the privilege of a retired Oakland teacher over 35 years, and the niece of many retired teachers as well. Representation matters, and safe spaces where you can be taught by people that live in the community. It's important. We know that during children's development, this idea of belonging is really important for self-esteem, for visualizing, having teachers that can speak life into the students and say you have a bright future, also can meet needs, closing the gap. I come from a parent a two-parent household, but a mother who was a teacher who would bring extra snacks for her students because she understood that learning can't go on when there's malnutrition and other things. So again, we're talking about high touch, and it's really important for our students to be in schools and spaces where they're getting holistic needs met.
Janani, let me ask you something. You were out there on the front line, walking with these kids, walking with the teachers, and walking with the parents. And I know we're wrapping it up, but what was the energy that you felt when you were out there? And I've seen the pictures of you, and I saw you out there. You go, see, audience, let me be clear. Why don't we get behind, and we will, to support Janani Ramachandra, because she is out there on the front line and not getting paid off by the billionaires and millionaires who own schools in Oakland, charter schools, one being KIPP, owned by the Fisher family, who owns the Oakland A's and who's trying to own the Howard Terminal to build his Disneyland, where the mayor just came from Washington, D.C., visiting Vice President Kamala Harris to get hundreds of millions of dollars. Thank you.
Yeah, the energy was infectious. You had kids, you had parents. The kind of turnout that we've been seeing this week is the kind of organization that typically involves weeks to plan. And that's part of why they decided to streamline this decision. They thought they could get this done in 10 days because they thought that wasn't enough time to get communities together to show up. And here we are. We were hundreds of people, more than 2,000 on that Zoom call, and so many more events this week, some of which are organized by our guests later today. I think this shows that this is an issue that matters. When you have this many people who might not show up to other issues that electeds and politicians and campaigns, care about, but when you have the basics, fundamentals, schools, people show up because they care. And I've frankly been jaded by a lot of decisions lately at the local and state level that are not listening to the voices of public comment. But this time around, the volume of people that are there are school staff members on hunger strike right now, and that all of this together has to make an impact, and I am hopeful.
Well, as we wrap this up, Janani, let me be clear. We appreciate you getting out there. And audience, I want you to look at this sister, Janani Ramachandran Esquire. How many other politicians do you see out there who are paid by you? Janani's not paid by you. They're sitting at home collecting them fat checks while our city kids in the Black and brown neighborhood are suffering. The mental disparity that they're going through is devastating them, and you're just making another generation of kids who feel hopeless and helpless. Janani, as always, you are a welcome beacon of light on this show. And sister, I will see you out there on the front line.
I will see you soon. Thank you so much for having me.
See you next week.
Thank you, Janani.
Dr. Ashley, can you give us a sponsor break? And let's immediately get our next special guest on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. And before we go and acknowledge our sponsor, just want to highlight two websites for our listeners who are interested in pursuing therapy, therapyforblackgirls.com and therapyforblackmen.org. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover of Black USA News. And be sure to tune into Sister Biz with Nicole and Tamara on Wednesdays, and also Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays. RSVP and join Chef Carter Lewis every Friday in February for amazing biscuit sandwiches and $5 ice cold beer at Soul Slice. And on February 13th, check in for their gospel brunch located 5849 San Pablo Avenue, Oakland, California, 94608. They can be reached by telephone 510-879-7689 and their website www.soulslice.com. Support a local eatery in Oakland and check out their catering services for your personal or business event. Make your reservations today. We also want to salute Ms. Tammy Willis, owner of Magnolia Engineering and Construction. Visit the company's website, www.magnoliaengineeringandconstruction.com. We want to be a part of growing with our community of Oakland, California. Connect with Magnolia Engineering and Construction now on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And finally, to join our advertisement family, please send us an email at bbrt 2021@hotmail.com. Back to you, Doug. I'm so excited for our next segment.
And to just close out on our sponsorship audience, please donate, send money, and support your Black media who looks out for people like Dr. Ashley and myself who are on this screen today. Thank you so much. Let's welcome Saabir Lockett, Director of the Faith Alliance, a moral economy. And the acronym is FAME, F-A-M-E. Dr. Ashley, his bio is so magnificent. Can you let our audience know what an amazing, awesome, and life-changing experience for other Black people in this city, this county, this country, and this world that Saabir Lockett is? Thank you.
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. Mr. Saabir Lockett is a former gang member from Los Angeles County, sentenced to life in prison at 19 years of age after several years of perpetrating the same criminal behavior which led him to prison. He underwent self-help therapy, gained his GED, graduated from college, and earned his paralegal license. His drive and determination ultimately led him to challenge his conviction, resulting in his release from prison 21 years later. Today, Saabir Lockett is the director of the Faith Alliance for a Moral Economy, FAME, an initiative of the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy, a mayor-appointed commissioner for the city of Oakland, ensuring that formerly incarcerated people have a right to job access, inclusion, and upward mobility. He is also a community advocate and activist leading groundbreaking strategies to improve the conditions of underserved communities of color, and a certified mentor to the formerly incarcerated. Greetings, Saabir, and welcome to the Black Business Roundtable.
Greetings. Thank you. Thank you for that warm introduction.
Saabir, let me be perfectly clear here. I graduated from Castlemont High School, Oakland, California, and a lot of brothers have gone to prison and are still in prison. Mm-hmm. And to hear your story, as well as our next guest, I want this audience to get the full impact, because I'm going to shut my mouth. I'm going to let you do most of the talking, but I want them to get the full impact of how being in charge of your mind can set you free. Thank you. Now, we're going to start off. We need to understand your past path before we get to your present and future pathway. Please give our audience a brief Cliff Notes version overview of how you at 19 years old were sentenced to life in prison. I can only imagine what moment of sentencing was like. Thank you, sir, and take as much time as you need.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Blacksher, dear friend. Thank you, Dr. Ashley, for having me on this show. I appreciate Janani Ramachan, fearless community leader, definitely in support of all that she do with the, groundbreaking leadership that she's providing for our community. And again, I just also thank you for this opportunity, to uplift the voices of directly impacted by incarceration, which also includes not only the formerly incarcerated or incarcerated, but also the families in society as a whole that's impacted by violent crime. And I think it's also really important to address some very significant issues for Black people, right? Like, I think, and I love this Black space because my story didn't start at 19. My story started in slavery and racism. My story, it's the history of all violence is state violence. And my story actually started in the 60s, right? So, and I'll give you a little chronological order of things. But in 69, it was the year of the highest crime rate in Los Angeles County. In 72, Los Angeles and Oakland had the highest per capita murder rate in the U.S. Today, LA is number 8 and Oakland is number 5, right? In 85, the CIA and the Nicaragua drug wars triggered a flood of cocaine into the Black communities. By the next decade, Black families were devastated by this highly addictive drug, and we were dealing with major crime wars that was created through these sequence of events, right? So by the time I was 19 years old, I was highly influenced by the street life, fast cars, fast money, hood credibility. I also had a need for acceptance and not having an understanding of the difference between like a healthy or unhealthy acceptance. I accepted that which was readily available to me. People think like, oh, you have a family, a caring mother, a caring father. Well, the streets have a greater pull on our children, and we need to really focus on that than the home. You know what I'm saying? And going after, again, seeing your homeboys or seeing all these people living their life, they're gang banging, and you get influenced by this. You want to be accepted by them. You know what I'm saying? And so you accept that unhealthy acceptance. I did. You know what I'm saying? So before I even realized it, that my life was leading to like destruction that would unfold, I began to do crime. And before I knew it, I was in prison serving a life sentence. So at sentencing, what that feels like, people can glorify that and say, I'm about that life. But I'm gonna tell you what it was about for me. It was about that I had lost all hope of a future. I was shamed by not being able to be the child my grandparents, my mother, my dad wanted me to be. I became desensitized towards human pain and suffering for a few reasons. One was because it was the only way that I could cope with the devastation that my life had turned into. So I didn't want to feel anything, right? I didn't want to be vulnerable. And then the other aspects was I had to survive prison. I didn't just go to prison. I went to a level 4, one step from death row prison at 19 years old. And no matter what people think about what prison is, you don't know what that reality is like, or the violence of that environment, the toxic masculinity of that environment till you get there.
Let me be clear, audience. If you didn't know, now you know. Dr. Ashley, please.
Absolutely. Saabir, again, I talked in the early segment about resilience, and it's very clear that even though you experience that shame, that desensitization, these survival skills while incarcerated, that there was a shift that allowed you to change your mindset. How did you take care of your mental health, and how did you start to consider a future after incarceration?
Well, that in itself is also a journey, right? It's so many elements. We could write a whole movie about this. But, I would just say, like, it took me quite some time. Like in the bio, with the mentality I had, I just kept spiraling down that slippery slope. You know what I mean? And it was no hope. And I would eventually catch another life sentence while in prison, which even made it worse. But luckily, by the grace of the Creator, and the love of my family that loved me when I was really young, I had a reference point to go back to. I think a lot of folks that suffer in our communities that suffer prison, kind of maybe lack that sometime. Because I had that, I still had something to like in me that was going to fight against my conditions. Right. So I would say it took me till I was around like 27 years old to realize, that I wasn't loving myself, and it also not taking the time to adequately care about my well-being. I was in like, again, one of the worst prisons at this time in the state of California. I was in Pelican Bay SHU, which is isolation. And I woke up one day, to be 100% honest, I woke up one day in the cell by myself. I had already been in there for about 3.5 years, and the weight of my situation just came crashing down on me. I cried like a baby for the first time in my life in a very long time. I cried once when I first went to prison, and this was probably the second time in prison I cried. And I decided that something had to change, and that change had to start with me. Like, it wasn't going to be my parents. It wasn't going to be even seeking my freedom. That was going to be my salvation. But my salvation was going to rest on me changing my mentality and dealing with my conditions, right? Like trying to understand, like, how did I get here and why? And why did I continue to live this life after even being impacted with a life sentence? So, and with that, you know, I had to also realize I had in that change, I had to stop gangbanging, which is another journey within itself. You know, I wasn't on protective custody. You know, I was in general population. And, you know, being a street reputable or a prison reputable, that had consequences of stop gangbanging, right? But I had, again, to generate the courage. If I could love myself the way I love and gave myself to the streets and to the gang life, then let me give myself that same energy. You know, let me give me that care and that self-support, and things would begin to change. And I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do different. I just knew I didn't want to continue to do what I was doing. So I started to do the opposite, right? And in doing the opposite, I naturally fell into a rhythm of things that was good for me and that I accepted. So again, I began to undergo like a multitude of cognitive therapy programs, anger management, stress management, alternative to violence, family reunification. I reconnected with my family and friends in healthy, acceptable ways, right? Ways that was nourishing me to become a better person and to do something different with myself. After about 5 years in isolation, you know, I finally was released back to general population. And this is like, I think, one of the really critical pieces, because when you blind to something you don't know, you know, I mean, it's easy to be blind. It's like the Matrix. You want the red pill or you want the blue pill? You know what I'm saying? Do you want to stay asleep or do you want to get woke? Right. So when I get back into general population, I was devastated by what I began to recognize and that I didn't see before. You know what I'm saying? You know, I began to like, you know, see, you know, through my own self-worth, you know, I began to see like that most prisoners was lost, confused, and hurting people. Like, this wasn't people that just did crimes. I mean, we think about people that do crime. These are sons. These are, even for women, these are daughters. These are parents. These are people that are suffering every day in so many different ways, right? And then violence become a means of just escaping that reality, or drugs become a means of escaping that reality, because it's way just too damn painful to deal with. You know what I'm saying? So at one point, you know, again, as in my growth and my eyes started opening up to different things, you know, I wanted to provide some type of solution. So I started to petition like the prison guards, you know, and like the sergeants, the administration, that we need some type of programs on these yards, because people are like suffering mental health. They're suffering and people need help. People need care. People need programs. And it wasn't no programs for level 4 prisoners. You know, only thing that was available was camps, level 1s, level 2s, very low level. Didn't nobody care about nobody had life. You know, you're a condemned person. You know what I mean? So was nothing available. You just in your cell 23 hours a day. Then you get out, and then you're just on the yard with your homeboys and stuff like that. So at the same time that I was petitioning the guards about what we needed, I started petitioning the people who helped me. And I had the ability to do correspondence courses. So, and with that, they started to come in. I created a program called Rehabilitation for Success. And then we started teaching gang prevention, gang violence prevention. And then started creating these workshops for the yard for violence interruption, you know what I mean, conflict resolution workshops. And then in doing that, helping others began to help me. And that encouraged me more. And again, when I started with, I had unhealthy acceptances. This became a very healthy acceptance for me, helping others. And that's how I began to, you know, really grow into my leadership and transition the force or the energy that I was putting into all the negative into positive, you know. And then again, I began to become vulnerable. You know what I mean? Even with my own family about the things I was suffering and going through. And that helped me to further live into who I needed to be in my transition and change. And then I would go to, again, like in the introduction, I would get my GED. I would graduate from college and early childhood education. I would go to business college and graduate. I would later begin to, you know, think about my own situation. And I, you know, got smart. Yeah, I got smart. And I was like, well, again, it's all transferable skills. You know, I think like the same energy that it takes to do wrong and be negative, the same energy that it takes to stay up all night, sell crack on the corner. You know what I'm saying? The same energy it takes to, you know, like I'm going to battle against this person that's trying to battle against me is the same energy it takes to get up and go to work. The same energy it takes to, you know, sign up for a course in college and graduate. You know, and these transferable skills are readily available. It's dedication, is having the initiative to do something different, you know, and really just believing in yourself. And then it's education, because without education, you don't have an objective basis of reality. I didn't. And as I began to help other men, I saw that they didn't as well. So it's like the more we know, the better we could do. You know, we expand our horizons, and our world does not become that block. That world does not become California. It becomes this, you know what I'm saying, the state of the US, Africa, Asia. And then I began to look at myself different as I started seeing others as well. And then eventually I would, you know, petition my case that I no longer needed to be in prison serving a life sentence. The Board of Prison Terms denied me 7 times. I fought my case for 7 years and then eventually won and came home.
Man, let me tell you something. I'm only going to take 30 seconds. When this show first started, I had my uncle who, when I was 13 years old, I went in front of the judge. Judge was going to give me from the age that they convicted me till I was 25 years old. My uncle had just graduated from Bolt Hall. And people just don't know. Black men and women are targeted from the time they come out of the womb of their mothers. I was blessed to have a second chance at an early age, and you sound like you are blessed. And not from an uncle or auntie, but from yourself. So I want to say this, audience, look at this man here on this stage and this platform. When I go like this, you think of that. Congratulations, and we love you, man, for sharing your story on this platform and this stage.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, if I could also tap into another element of this too, right? And again,
Please.
like it is about self-determination. And getting the wherewithal about yourself that I'm going to be successful. I'm going to, and every day we have a right to make a difference. You know, I have a mantra that goes today that I wake up every day, the rest is up to me. You know what I mean? So we can water whatever garden we choose and flourish. But also I think a part of the question was, what was the transition? And the transition was equally as difficult as the self-transformation needed to come out that situation. Transitioning back into society is not easy. You know, they have conditions set up for your failure. You know, I had to go into transitional housing, that was worse than being in prison. I mean, literally worse than being in prison, because it had the conditions of the criminal elements that would put me back in prison after serving 21 years. And I'm saying I am home and I'm trying to make a difference. So I had to, you know, suffer a lot, like our other guest that we have, and a dear friend of mine, John Jones III, you know, suffered from homelessness, you know, because I didn't want to live in transitional housing, suffered from lack of job opportunities because I had a felony. And it wasn't until I kept getting fired from jobs. I mean, I went through a training for AT&T, became an AT&T outside plant technician, got my truck, got my uniforms, got my tools, was very skilled, top of my class. And on a day that I was supposed to go to work, I was fired.
You know, I got to say this. I've worked for companies like UPS, Cisco Food, and construction company, transportation company. They have white men and women who are working for them, who have felonies, who have murder, who have drug convictions, kingpin, child molesters, you name it. But the white man will hire them. You just validated my problem with corporate America, billion and $1 million company. You went through all this training, you dedicated yourself, you got yourself together, and they wanted to destroy your mind, and still you rose.
Indeed.
um, let,
Indeed.
let me fire off now, because you know what? I keep rubbing my eyes because so many brothers like you are in prison and get out of prison and don't think like you, and then end up going back to prison or getting caught on drugs or getting out there in the street and getting caught up in the same game and getting killed. So thank you. Thank you. And I know this brother. I met him working on Pamela Price's run for district attorney. He's out there not only changing his life and being in program, but he's trying to change the district attorney who puts Black men and women in jail. And we're gonna touch on that a little bit before we go, but that is where I met this brother at. I had no idea of your story until you and I actually met. So as John Jones is coming on next, speak truth to power, my brother.
Indeed.
Doug, before you jump in, you knew I was going to jump. Let me just say something.
Please.
You just said a lot of powerful points. What stuck out to me as a psychologist is when you talked about allowing yourself to cry, to feel emotions. And I want to take a time out because we've talked about, I've been plugging therapy for Black men, but I want to talk to our parents out here that socialize young Black boys to only be able to express certain emotions. And we understand that the streets have a code and that there are only certain emotions that you can show, but we really need to create safer spaces for Black male vulnerability.
Yes.
Not label Black men when they show certain emotions. And that's, sisters and brothers, we have to listen when a Black man starts to show vulnerability, because I'm recognizing that there's only opportunities where someone will let you in, kind of crack that door open. And if it's rejected, you may not get another opportunity. So I want to say that. Another thing that I'm excited to hear as a clinician are just the programs that you plug, stress management. These are all wellness practices that we're trying to figure out how to introduce our youth to early on to build up these skills. Yes, we want them to read, write, speak well, blah, 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 but also how to manage emotions. And then again, when you talk about that self-love and being able to see yourself in a different way in your environment. Wow.
Or let me go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say that is the most critical points, because when it comes to how do you weather the storm, it's one thing to push through something. You know what I mean? You can have all the power in the world and knock down a wall, but power is not going to always knock down a wall. Power is not going to knock down a mountain, but strength is going to barrel through that mountain. And you may not get there tomorrow, but you may get there next week. You know what I'm saying? So what are the elements in place to strengthen your resolve around the difficulties that we face after incarceration? And that vulnerability aspect is really critical, because it's the opportunity to say, I need help. I'm on the verge of breaking. I done went after job after job after job, and I don't have opportunity. They're closing them, and I need money in my pocket. I need to eat. What do I do? That opening up that way provides opportunity for folks to give you answers and assist. We don't do it alone. We do it with others, and at that last job, when they finally denied me, I was at a breaking point. And I was fortunate enough to, be wanting to do social justice work. And I'll tell you a story about, because I had already been doing so inside. I just didn't know how to do it out in society, so I ended up meeting a person, right? This man that everybody was talking about. And I wanted to be like, man, let me meet this person and be like this person, or let me let me get in, and like, how do you do this work out here after incarceration? And this person worked at the Ella Baker Center. And this person is our next guest, Mr. John Jones III. And when I first met him, he told me, brother, know what it is that you want to do. Figure out what you want to do. No one can do what anybody else want to do out here, but figure out what you want to do. I met another person named Jamise Myers, you see what I'm saying, who at the time was working at the job I'm working at right now. And she was like, that is a very devastating story, You need to tell it. You need to become a voice for others, that may be going through the same thing. And it was a port campaign. We was fighting at the port for good jobs policies and formerly incarcerated folks to get job opportunities, inclusion, upward mobility, accessibility, fair wages, medical benefits, all that. And that became my catalyst for activism. How do I use my voice to make a difference for others who, didn't have that opportunity and maybe also getting doors slammed? If we could change policy to give that opportunity, then let's fight that fight.
Saabir, what is life like for you now as director of Faith Alliance for Moral Economy, bang, and East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy? And what does your day-to-day entail and the role you play at this organization? Thank you, sir. And man, I'm telling you, I'm going to say this, what you said about crying. See, when I was running the streets at 12, 13, they said, you don't cry, you man up. And that ends up hurting you. So thank you for sharing that point. But please, it's all on you, sir. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. I think, and I love how we went through these sequences of like, where you are, who are you? We are a sum total of all of our experiences. And I just hate how white America sometimes want to say, give me your title and let's talk about that. No, who I am was the LA gangbanger that did a hell of a lot of crime. And it was a process to get here. It was a struggle to get here. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of our folks are dealing with that same problem. So thank you. So I would just say like East Bay Alliance for Sustainable Economy, we galvanize comprehensive campaigns that bring together workers, community members, and people of faith to kind of like rise the bar for low wage workers. And we call it like open the door to family sustainable careers, creating healthy environments and thriving neighborhoods. And then so eBase has a faith based component to it. And that's the Faith Alliance for a More Economy. So I am the director of the Faith Alliance for a More Economy. And we mobilize faith leaders and communities to act in solidarity with low wage workers and tenants. So I'm a key strategist in our campaigns for worker justice, as well as tenant protections. I provide campaign support for Contra Costa County, particularly Concord, for anti-harassment policies, whether that's advocacy at the Board of Supervisors level or at City Council level, or solidarity support in any of the surrounding cities, Antioch, Richmond, all of Contra Costa County. Particularly for Alameda County, we do worker justice rights and support of worker justice rights. My organization was the organization that actually created the minimum wage standard increase for the city of Oakland. We won record-breaking community benefits agreements against developers. I was a steering committee person also for the Howard's Terminal development site that the A's are trying to buy. I was a member of the steering committee for economic development and jobs. And so I participated in a variety of different things, and just about all things social justice within the two counties. And what does that look like to galvanize the faith community, right? And give voice to the moral voice, the moral call of action, the theological reflections that say we're talking about human beings here. So even like in the moral budget, right, or the budget fight itself, people are talking about policy. Well, what I bring is the comprehensive campaigns that say the budget is a blueprint of our values. So can we see humanity in these decisions? When we're making these decisions, we're talking about the little kid that need a park to play at. We're talking about the worker, that's working 2-3 jobs that needs one stable job. These are the things that we're talking about that's sustainable for our whole society.
And we're working with a few minutes left, so I'm going to sum up my question and Dr. Ashley, because we want to bring on John. And let me just say this. I humbly ask, and I'm going to talk to our backstage person, we need you to come back And just listening to you, we need to give you a whole show, because those brothers and sisters who are coming out of the correctional institution, they need to hear this.
Right.
They need to know there's life. And then the
Mhm.
ones who are on the verge of going in, they need to hear this. They know what it means to get life. So I'm going to ask one question real quick, Dr. Ashley, because we want to get John Jones on here. But let me be clear, Mr. Saabir Lockett, we humbly beg you to come back on this show, and we want to give you a full segment to articulate all these incredible things that you are doing, have done to improve not only yourself, your family, but our community.
Thank you so much. I would love to. This will be a pleasure.
How were you chosen by the mayor as appointed commissioner for the city of Oakland, ensuring that informally incarcerated people have the right to job access, inclusion, and upward mobility? Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, I'll be real quick for the sake of time, right? But I would say that because of the it's not enough to win a policy. You know, it's you can't just win the policy. You have to ensure the implementation of that policy and oversight. So after the port win and one been, you know, along with Mr. John Jones III, he was on that fight as well. You know, winning one of the biggest ban-the-box policies in the state of California for job opportunities for formerly incarcerated folks. It was really important to me that I was a part of a compliance component. I wanted to see implementation. I wanted to see compliance. I wanted to see actualization of these wins. So I would go eventually, you know, I went to a BCLI, Boards and Commissioners Leadership Institution, got trained up on different, you know, political strategies on sitting on boards and commissions, and then applied for the Oakland Army-based Community Job Oversight Commission, and then was inaugurated into the position as a commissioner after the mayor accepted my application by the city council.
Dr. Ashley, can you wrap it up with the last few questions, and let's let this man know that you are a welcome breath of fresh air and a glass of water, which you are drinking, back on this show. Go ahead, Dr. Ashley.
I'll pose it, Saabir, but kind of give us a cliffhanger, because we have to bring you back. But you know, you shared your story, which we so appreciate. Again, the past and current. Give us a little teaser about what the future might look like for you and what you're working on. And I want to give a caveat that we had a comment that said that this story, you said it needs to be documented. And we had a comment while you were speaking. Commenter said that this needs to be in a book and film. So I'm going to plug that. I'm in LA right now, Oakland born and bred. I'm in Los Angeles. So I agree, you being an LA native, that this story needs to be documented. But I digress. What are you working on, Mr. Saabir?
Oh, you know, I would say, like, for self, it's really simple. You know, like I said, I want to write, you know, I want to work on a book. You know, I've been doing a lot of writing to just get my story out of me. You know, let me just get it out and then kind of figure out, you know, how to put that together to tell my story. But I'm also, something that's really, really important to me, and I am loving being a father. I never thought I would ever be a father. And today I'm the father of a beautiful 2-year-old son, Kamal Lockett, the love of my heart. And that's what I'm working on, and continuing to do the work of self-actualization so I can be a healthy father and, you know, for my son, you know, and give him all the love and support he needs, that doesn't have to deal with toxic masculinity, doesn't have to deal with all these elements that prevent men from being vulnerable and soft, and just trying to live in a healthy state, right? Another thing I'm doing, so for community, I'm also a member of Community Ready Corps, and I do a lot of work with Turha Ak, the founder of Community Ready Corps, and we focus on, like, belief that in order to truly be self-determined, we need a community that can be able to express itself wherever power is being expressed. So that looks like 9 levels of self-determination. You know, that's self-defense and safety, economics and prosperity, education and competence, you know, family systems and stability, traditions and ways, as well as technology efficiency, in politics and governance, in health and well-being. How can we get the self-determination in these areas so that Black people will be successful? And we do produce giveaways every week to provide resources for our community. Like Janani mentioned, I'm organizing this weekend. I've been organizing Stop the Violence in West Oakland over by Prescott Elementary. We're doing community peace and cleanup walks in support of our progressive council member, Carol Fife. And because we want to bring together the everyday homeboy and homegirl. We want to bring together the faith leaders. We want to bring together the elders, the kids. And we have to tell everyone violence is not the answer. And we have to save our kids, period. We got to save our kids. We have to put our lives on the line for our kids. And we need to build a community, because if you know my story, you will not hate me.
And as we wrap this up, let me be clear here. You are going to be just like our legal expert, Janani Ramachandran. We will be inviting you back on. Dr. Ashley, can you close this out, because we want to get John on? And I tell you what, brother, I knew you was deep, but I kept doing like this because I was, and go ahead and close this out. But Saabir, we're going to see you again. Audience, This is the epitome of a Black king, not only in this city, in this county, in this state, in this country, but in this world. Thank you, King Saabir Lockett, for using your mind to free yourself. Thank you. Dr. Ashley, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Saabir. So, and also thank you, Mr. Donnie Glover, Black USA News. And be sure to tune in to our YouTube page, YouTube.com/Donnie Glover, for more informative and insightful Black community news. Also like us on Facebook today. Support Oakland small business, such as Soul Slice by Chef Carter Lewis. And don't forget to RSVP for their February Friday evening biscuit sandwiches and $5 ice cold beer. And also RSVP for the Gospel Brunch on Sunday, February 13th, located at 5849 San Pablo Avenue, Oakland, California, 94608. Phone number 510-879-7689, and also contact them via their website, www.soulslice.com. Support a local eatery in Oakland and check out their full service catering menu. Also, want to acknowledge Magnolia Engineering and Construction, whose mission is to become the premier building and engineering resource for large-scale commercial and transportation building projects in the Bay Area and beyond. The vision is to further the presence of Black women in the construction and engineering industry through key partnerships and building contracts in various sectors. Doug, back to you.
Saabir Lockett, Director of Faith Alliance for a Moral Economy. Bang! We will see you soon. Please, I will be calling you this week to schedule another interview, and we're going to schedule the whole show, because what you said can not only change lives, but save lives. Thank you, sir. We'll see you next time. God bless, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Love you both. Peace.
Thank you, Saabir.
Now, audience, let's get ready to fire it up again with John Jones, with BOSS, Director of Reentry and Violence Prevention Program. Dr. Ashley, please introduce this magnificent brother. And you really don't have to introduce him, because the previous brother already introduced him. So light it up with Mr. John Jones, Director of the Reentry and Violence Prevention Program of BOSS. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Mr. John Jones III is a devoted father of 3 and third-generation East Oakland resident. He is on staff with Building Opportunities for Self-Sufficiency, BOSS, where he serves as the Director of the Reentry and Violence Prevention Programs. Formerly incarcerated, now an advocate transforming his community by channeling his experiences and expertise on issues related to criminal justice reform, police accountability, housing, employment, and public safety. After being unsheltered and unemployed for 18 months, John became involved within his community. Community involvement turned into organizing, advocacy, and empowerment. John shared his personal testimony through his story of pain, trauma, faith, and transformation to inspire young people and fight for policy change. He has worked at the local, regional, and state level for ballot measures, much needed programs, and services. As a result, John has received a number of awards and accolades, but most importantly, feels proud to help make his hometown of Oakland, California, a safer and vibrant place for all. Welcome, Mr. John Jones III. Thank you for joining us.
Well, let me say this to finish up all those accolades and accomplishments. John Jones is also on the team of Ray Bobbitt and the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. I had to put that in because we are going to have a first Black NFL-owned team here in Oakland, and we are going to have a woman NBA team here in Oakland owned by Black people. Just like, and this is not from anybody on the stage from me, Mayor Libby, just like you went to Washington, D.C. to visit Vice President Kamala Harris to get hundreds of millions of dollars for a white developer to build a Disneyland, John Fisher, who owns Oakland A's, I hope and pray that you do it for this organization. John Jones, my brother, I did not know you had something directly to do with Saabir. First off, this is the type of networking that is going to uplift our people into sustainability of our own people. So I'm going to fire up the first question. As a third generation East Oakland resident, you have seen the growth and evolution of Oakland up until the time you were incarcerated. Can you give our audience a brief history of how you came to be in prison and how long was the term of incarceration? Thank you, sir. And thank you for working with Saabir too. I had no idea. You know, man, let me get some tissue. Go ahead.
I want to start by, first of all, thanking the two of you, Dr. Ashley, Brother Blacksher, for this opportunity, just for inviting me here. I'm really humbled to be a part of this with the previous speakers, Saabir and Janani. I'm just humbled anytime, when people say nice things. Because for those of us who are formerly incarcerated, we are accustomed to being called the worst, being called everything but a child of God. So for me, I like to always drink and take these moments in. I think it's important, especially during this current pandemic, which has exacerbated mental health issues across the board. With that being said, I've served 2 long bids. I was incarcerated from the age of 16 to 24 in the California Youth Authority, and then I did 5 years in prison from 2007 to 2012. I really want to talk about the first bid because the second bid was influenced by the first bid in terms of the sentencing I received. I can talk forever about it. I would say this, for more extensive information on it, I was blessed to write an op-ed in January of last year, and I was pleased to be awarded by the SPJ Northern California. They gave me an award for best commentary and analysis. So if folks get a chance, you can Google it. It was published in the Oakland side, and it will cover much of this. And it's so important because just like Saabir shared, our criminal injustice system functions or should I say malfunction from this standpoint. Society is perfect, but the person who was arrested, they are the outlier. I'm gonna say that again. It operates as if our society is perfect and someone like me who was arrested was the outlier, the malcontent. I define my story in this way. I call it the 5 years. In June of 1985, I graduated from Highland Elementary on 85th Avenue in Deep East Oakland. I literally won every academic accolade in that school, including I was the spelling champ of the entire school. Right. I skipped from the 1st to the 3rd grade. I was academically bright. I joke with people. There's things that the one thing that I don't have in common with other people, I don't have a 2nd grade teacher. Right. They wanted to skip me again. I was academically bright, but a number of things transpired that led up to December of 1990, 5 short years later, where I found myself involved in a drive-by shooting that tragically took the life of one teenager and wounded 2 others. 3 things in particular I want to lift up because it's relevant today. The first was I was 12 years old. All these things happened in 1986 when I was 12. I was 12 years old the first time I was slammed against the wall and assaulted by law enforcement. I was playing baseball, retrieved the ball that went over the fence. By the time I came back, I seen OPD officers. Didn't give it much thought, even though at this time we're talking about the height of the crack cocaine epidemic, which was raging across this nation, East Oakland specifically. And to think that this cop was slamming against the wall and he called me the N-word. And I had 2 takeaways. The first was how angry he was. He was so mad. His face was flushed. He was pink. I could not understand why was he so upset with me, a child. And then he said the N-word. So yes, I'm 3rd generation East Oakland resident through my dad and granddad. My mother moved to California. So they're from the deep South. So for me, I associated that with like the 60s and 50s and Jim Crow. I did not think as a Black child in Oakland, California in 1986, I would be called the N-word. So my takeaway from that was the police in our community represented the ultimate form of authority, right? They represented, quote unquote, everything they were doing was supposed to be sanctioned by society. So if I didn't warrant the respect and dignity from an official representative of our society, then I didn't want to have no place within this society. The second incident that occurred a few weeks later, I was walking down the street with my 2 older cousins and 3 kids was coming our way. And, you know, the typical male bravado, you know, they had looks on their face, me mugging. My cousins were both older. One was pretty big for his size. So he was like, what are y'all looking at? And these 3 young fellas took a few steps, turned around, put out a handgun and just started shooting. My 2 older cousins ran. I froze. When they say, you know, what is it, fight or flight? You know, I froze or freeze. I froze. I couldn't understand what was happening. I'm 12 years old, and all of a sudden, something as meaningless as a mean mug, these people are shooting at us. And what woke me from my stupor was the sound of the bullet above my head hitting the stop sign. At that point, I ran. And I don't know if you ever had a dream where you feel like you're running in slow motion. My 12-year-old brain, y'all, was visualizing the back of my brains being blown out JFK style. 12 years old, when your brain is not fully developed. Me and my cousins, we laughed it off, you know, typical male bravado, but I was very shook. I'm even feeling it right now, how I was feeling then. I reached a point to where I had to make a decision. If I was going to survive this new change in East Oakland, then I would have to adopt a mentality that was just as cold and ruthless as what I experienced. Because I reached a point in my life at a young age to where we were no longer considered innocent, whether it's from the police or even from each other. This leads to the last incident. Felix Wayne Mitchell Jr., his funeral. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Me and my friends went down there and we're seeing this carriage carried by horses and FBI agents driving all his vehicles. When I look back on that, to me, that felt like a setup. Like, why would the federal government drive vehicles belonging to Felix? No disrespect to Felix, but what it did for many of us was that became our way out.
Wait, let me explain to our audience who Felix Mitchell was, and not the city of Oakland and the county, but in the state, so that they can get a feel and then finish the story. Thank you.
I hate to limit who Felix was because people say he's the first and biggest drug dealer from Oakland. He actually had regional impact. I call him the underground CEO. If Felix had access to the legitimate economy that marginalizes and freezes most of us out, if he had that access, he could have been CEO of a top Fortune 500 company. Instead, he was reduced like many others to try to get it how we live, selling drugs. At that time, it was heroin before it was cocaine. And I want to add this too. He was arrested, and ultimately his conviction was overturned. So he is not a convicted or a formerly incarcerated person. I think it's important to share that. But I'm invoking this memory for a reason, because we're talking about a time and era where many of us, I grew up on Section 8 housing, grew up on food stamps, grew up in poverty, didn't even know we were poor. to be honest, until I used to go to my cousin's house in Union City. I'm like, y'all got things that work? Like, y'all actually got blinds? Like, we had sheets for curtains. We have curtains? Like, what is this? These are blinds? You have a fully stocked refrigerator? We ate barbecue sauce sandwiches or sugar sandwiches because we didn't have meat. You understand what I'm saying? So when we seen that funeral, for many of us, we like, you know what? To escape a life of poverty, that's the way to go. So at that point, I'm 7th grade. I went from being a straight A student to literally basically not even going to school. In fact, I was allowed to walk the stage at Bret Hart Junior High, even though I didn't get a diploma. You understand what I'm saying? So those 3 events in particular just threw me off. I no longer believed education was the pathway. I didn't see people in my community going to college. The increase of guns and violence put me in a position to where, hey, you got to survive. And that's what ended up happening. Long story short, I was attacked by some folks with some pipes, found out where they live. And in Oakland, retaliation is a must. You can't sit back and wait for somebody to come back and finish your job. And especially when your family members are at risk. Because at that time, if they can't get you, they get somebody close to you. So my official sentence was I was 16. I was charged as an adult. Didn't know anything about the system. Didn't even know what that was. And think about that. At 16 years old, society deems that I am not mature enough to drink alcohol, right? Society deems me as not being mature enough to be tasked with the responsibility of voting. But somehow, if you are arrested and charged with a crime, then at that point, I'm considered mature and adult. So I was given a sentence of 26 years to life, but I took a plea deal to go to the California Youth Authority, to where the longest they could hold you is to the age of 25. So I paroled 3 months shy of turning 25.
You know, John, I am so emotional because I was just telling Saabir earlier that, you know, I had somebody when I was 13 who came and rescued me from the white regime of putting black boys and girls in the 70s and 80s. So the story touches me. Anyway, Dr. Ash, can you ask the next question? I'm not in a condition right now.
No, yeah, no problem. John, your story is so powerful. And when you talk about the trauma and how, again, how we can be put into situations just by mere survival, and where's the consideration for that? I have the privilege to ask you the next question. What, if any, mental health treatment did you receive while incarcerated, both, if you can reflect on both bits?
Absolutely none. Here's something that's interesting. So when I went to the California Youth Authority, they do their intake. So part of that process is the psychological evaluation. And to answer Mr. Glover's question, yes, Felix the cat, absolutely. So here's what's interesting. First of all, so at this time I was 19, and then, you know, he's asking me questions about, you know, my committed offense. And he said something like, why you didn't call the police when you were attacked? And it blew my mind. At that moment, I realized this man lives in a totally different world, maybe a different universe than the one I live in. Where I'm from, we don't call the police. And if you did call the police, good luck. They ain't gonna show up anyway. And if they do, they're gonna treat you as a suspect. So the fact that that was even an option for him, and I'm like, this person is tasked with the responsibility of evaluating my mental state. Right? So long story short, none. And here's another problem. So I identified that I wanted to work on myself, because being removed from those conditions in the streets gave me time to reflect. And I think this is very important to share. Many of the socioeconomic conditions in the inner city, they're normalized for those of us who go through it. I had no idea those things were abnormal, because I didn't come from a world that gave me the privilege to not know what it's like to have a friend murdered at least once a week. Right? For a 4-year period, I reached a point where I had at least one friend murdered every week. That was normal in East Oakland. But outside of our community, some communities don't experience that, so they don't understand the impact upon us. So when I was trying to sign up for classes, they were like, oh, well, you have too much time left. You know, it's 1993. You don't parole to 1999. You have to wait until at least 1996. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I am angry. I recognize that I'm angry. You took me from one failed environment, put me into a worse one. What we call it is the world is a box, and then prison is a box, and then the whole is a smaller box. So it's a series of boxes that is continuously and perpetually traumatizing us, but not allowing us access, especially when we identifying that, hey, I need some help. So for me, I had to really focus on myself, like, what is it I wanted to do? Because again, keep in mind, incarceration, when I was in youth authority, I was at Brother Saabir shared Pelican Bay. I was in an institution called CHAD, aka Baby Pelican Bay, where we did 23-1. My first night there, the two people next to me in the cell were fighting. So it was so violent, we had to eat in ourselves, right? Come to find out the next day, the person killed his cellmate and proceeded to rape his dead body over the course of 18 hours. Imagine being in that type of environment. And it's supposed to be like, oh, well, hey, you shouldn't be here, right? I'm like, hey, where am I at, right? So there wasn't nothing, but I do want to share one thing, though. There was one program I thought was beneficial, and it was called the Unwanted Child Program. It was like a pilot project that someone came in, and to be honest, it was a white woman, and I was like, white liberals, God bless their heart. But I'm like, no, you don't understand me or my world. But it was some very important components. And I want to share just real quickly why it was so important. Because again, it put me on the path of understanding that word trauma. Didn't know what that was. You know, like many black men, you see it. If you get two kids, right? One male, one female, black boy, if he falls down, what we tell him? Get up, shake it off, stop crying. A little girl fall, oh, come here. So we're teaching our kids at an early age, and we're genderizing their emotional responses. We're setting them both up for failure. So I'm in an environment that don't allow you to produce tears, let alone even acknowledge that I have trauma. So this program put me in a position to really go dig deep into my childhood and look at some of the things that took place then, some of the things I felt was missing. And I think it really gave me the foundation and to put me into the position I'm in today. But absent of that program, nothing.
John, I have to follow this up with a few things. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jones III survived various forms of trauma. Now, when you talked about what you witnessed on your first night, I want to invite all of us. Now, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've heard a lot, John. I still felt it in my stomach. This is what we call vicarious trauma. So trauma can be what we see directly, or what we witness, or even what we hear. So if you noticed something happened in your stomach, or your heart rate increased, or you set up, or you moved, this is because we're hearing something that we're talking about: the threat of loss of life, the loss of life, the potential loss of safety, and you witnessing that potential threat of what can I do to protect that from it not being me. And this is what our young Black children are witnessing. And the statistics of PTSD, post-stress traumatic disorder, that's happening in the inner city, those statistics are higher than what we see combat veterans coming back from overseas. So I just want to highlight that we really need to, really emphasize the importance of therapy and of treatment of trauma and repeated trauma that can happen. Wow.
Yes, thank you. That's real.
No, thank you. Thank you.
John, forgive me for kind of, as my dad said, boy, what you crying for? I'll give you something to cry about. But what you said is so impactful, because I'm 59 years old. And I remember when where we lived at in Oakland, right around the street corner from Castle Mountain. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I humbly ask, because I've already told Saabir we're going to have a whole show with him. And now we need to do a whole show with you. Not only does this city and this county and this state and this country, but this world, Craig, this world needs to hear about this. Not very few, if a handful of men could have endured that and come as far as you come, brother. I'm proud of you. I'm proud to know you and Saabir. Now, if you want to call me a crybaby, you better not say it to my face. but I am so proud of you. And just knowing that what you're telling this audience, you told Saabir and you made a difference in another brother. So moving forward, audience, forgive me, I had a bug in my eye.
We're not apologizing for emotions.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's
and we're not apologizing for being human either. So.
Right.
That's right.
You're right. Thank you. What, Dr. Ashley, I can barely see. Can you read the last question?
I got you. John, can you share with us what your day-to-day is like in your role as the director of the Reentry and Violence Prevention Program? And what are some of the short-term goals that the program is working on this year?
Great question. Now we can turn this around. I'm going to put a smile on your face over there, even though the tears are good. Let me preface the answer by sharing this. I moved out of Oakland last April, right? So I didn't make an announcement. So that was a surprise to a lot of people because I knew that if I would have made that announcement, folks were like, no, stay. Because the people who I did tell said that. I left for a couple of reasons. The first main reason is my family, my mother and my siblings have lived in the state of Georgia for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. And being a single father, I just was really feeling the need for family reunification. The second part was, to be quite honest, I was feeling burnt out. I'm someone that, so typically in organizing and activist spaces, there's a tendency to be singular issue focused, right? Like this group is for housing or this is on the police. I'm someone who got involved in everything. I mean, literally, because we are impacted by everything, right? So when you get to a place where you're spending so much time and energy fighting for the city and then being blessed to be elevated in the leadership role, then obviously the toll increases. So long story short, I needed a break. I gave myself permission for my own self-care, for my own mental health, my own psychological well-being. So I did not apologize for leaving. But to get to your question, what were the goals? What it's like? I came back for two reasons. First, I understood that violence was still increasing. In fact, I was on a reimagining public safety task force, and I was one of 5 Black members who were keep trying to raise the issue, right? As people were talking about defund the police. To me, I wasn't opposed to defund. The issue I had was the omission of talking about what was happening in our community. That was a different thing. You follow what I'm saying? And when I left, even though I was at peace, I was able to sleep, I was feeling guilty. I was feeling tugged in my spirit that I had to return. And I will share this too. I like many of us, I suffer from survivor's guilt. I can share my stories of police brutality, of waking up with having guns pointed at my head by the police on more than half a dozen occasions. I can talk about the 14 years I've served total incarceration. I was blessed. Never been shot, never been stabbed, never been shanked. God was with me, and I thank my mother because she's a praying mother. I'm not here to preach religion, but I do believe in the power of prayer. That's why I'm here. I understand that. It's not about me, right? It's about something larger than me. So I wanted to address the violence by focusing on this, leadership development. This is why I'm grateful for Saabir, because when I came home in 2012, we're talking about right after Occupy, about 3.5 years removed from the murder of Oscar Grant. Criminal justice reform in Oakland was in its infancy stages, right? It was so much going on. And then I found that I was the only one in these spaces and places. So I wanted to create a pathway. Some people define leadership by the number of people who follow them, by their followers. I say by that metric and definition, that meant Hitler and Trump are great leaders. My definition and concept of leadership is willing to be transparent with the details of my life. Because first and foremost, I know that I'm not an outlier. Everything I experience is normal where I'm from. And I want to remove that shame and that stigma that prevents us. Because there's many of us who are formerly incarcerated and you probably won't even know because people don't feel safe to share that. So that's why I'm back here. I wanted to help develop the next generation of leaders. And Boss was a perfect vehicle for me because we have some amazing staff who are dedicated to helping folks who are returning from incarceration, helping them successfully reintegrate back into our society. But most importantly, giving folks a sense of agency. Because to me, it's about the whole person care, Dr. Ashley. It's not just saying, oh, this person need a house, they need a job. Those are things, yes, but guess what? Prison didn't give you that. People deserve to be whole. They deserve to have the right to do whatever fulfills their heart and spirit and not just having something pushed off on them. And then the other reason why I'm back is for the African American Sports and Entertainment Group. This is not just historic, it's historic. What we're doing is really demonstrating why Oakland has its global reputation as being a vanguard for social justice. We witnessed and protested at the egregious murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. For me, it's not enough to just say, or it's not enough to just have an outcry about injustice. We have to create and manufacture justice. We have to take the power that's in our hands that we inherited from our ancestors and elders. And I'll end on this one point. I never have no problem speaking truth to power. I will call out white supremacy and evil when I see it. You know why, Dr. Ashley and Brother Blacksher? Because ain't nobody can come outside my house and burn the cross. You feel me? Our ancestors endure far worse just for us to get to a place. So we owe it to them. We owe it to people today, and we owe it 7 generations in the future to do everything we can in this moment to make sure Black people are in a position to thrive, not just survive. Thrive, because too many of us, we're in survival mode, right? That's why we say things like we get it how we live. That's reactionary. No, I want us to be visionary. This project with the African American Sports and Entertainment Group is ambitious, it's visionary. Being the first Black-owned football team in the league. And guess what? That brother just spilled some more tea, right? This is the time, NFL. We just sent them a letter. Trust me, they're paying attention. To have a WNBA team here, let us not forget the role of sports as it relates to women and young girls. It is an important and valuable vehicle. But I want to be clear. A WNBA team is not just for women and girls. I am a big fan as well. We have to stop this. We are Oakland. We're for everybody. We're going to be that vanguard, and we're going to show the rest of the world what it looks like to represent the human family in this fullness. And then the last thing is there's 30,000 jobs associated. There will be affordable housing associated. One of the things that's near and dear in my heart, I want to share this too. I know we're getting that time. I'm a fan of history. I'm a Black nerd. I'm a blurred. I've always said Oakland is a city of champions in every sport, not just sports, right? Movies, Clint Eastwood, Tom Hanks, Bruce Lee. Right? We have so much. What would it look like to commemorate this greatness so youth and even not so young people can understand that they are literally walking the same sidewalk, y'all, as some of the best who ever done it in their respective fields? That's when I began to get transformed. If I thought I was just from the hood, then guess what? I ain't gonna be no better than a dope dealer. But when I realized, wait a minute, I walk on the sidewalk with greatness, now I have no excuse for me to try. Keyword, try. I have no excuse to not go out there and do everything I can to be the best person that I can be. So I'm honored. I'm here. Thank y'all.
John, I'm crying. I'm going to be honest, because what happened to me at 13, and Uncle, if you are on watching this show, and Mother and my father passed away, I'm listening to what happened to you, and that could have been me. I had somebody who just graduated from Bolt Hall, I'm Dr. Ashley, John, it has been a pleasure having you on this show. Yes. Dr. Ashley, can you close us out up until thank you, audience? Because my eyes.
I get it. No.
I can barely see this. I can barely.
No problem.
John, listen. What happened to you at 12 happened to me, brother. I was just fortunate to have somebody on my side. So thank you for sharing that. And audience, this is real. This is the Black Business Roundtable. And this is how you make kings and queens and presidents and CEOs, or without the help of the government and implementation of program, you can have what happened to Saabir and what happened to John. God bless you. Dr. Ashley, please.
And I just want to thank you, John, because even despite what happened, there's a resilient spirit in you and a call right? So when we talk about survivor's guilt, I want to just say something as we're closing. Survivor's guilt comes with surviving other conditions that others may not have, but it also comes with a mission and an assignment to carry out, to reach back and pull forward. We see you doing that. We absolutely want you to come back. We'd love to have a joint segment with you and Saabir, really talking about how we can make things happen. And I also just put a plug for my research for African-American girls in sports. That's what I did my dissertation on. So we could talk for a long time. But listeners, as you see today, we had an all-star cast of people sharing their personal narratives of resilience, what they've been through, but also the opportunity and the commitment to redefining their future. I want to thank our guests again, Janani Ramachandran. Look out for what she's doing by visiting her website, www.janani4oakland.com, or going to her Instagram page, Janani @Janani4 Oakland. Thank you again to Saabir Lockett, Director of the Faith Alliance for a Moral Economy, FAME, and again to John Jones, who's on staff with BOSS and also doing wonderful work with AASEG. And again, audience, thank you for tuning in to our discussion. Remember, together we can listen, learn, and share, because I know you care. A special thank you, signing off on behalf of Doug and myself, Dr. Ashley. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. It's needed. And trust me, people are listening. People have a hunger and thirst for truth and righteousness.